thanks. I'll just talk about the how it got started and then kind of where we are now. And some of my colleagues that are here today, Lisa and Alex, who are part of the project, and at a certain point they'll probably jump in and talk about it as well. So as Hope said just now, this is a project that's been funded by the Wellcome Mental Health Data Prize. And the starting point for this was that we saw there was a call for requests for funding as part of this data prize. And the project started with the idea that there's an overarching question which is to do with what are the active ingredients that make a difference in preventing and treating and managing anxiety and depression in young people. And Wellcome have funded a number of projects in the last few years that really kind of fit with this idea of active ingredients. And the idea is that active ingredients are a number of different things that might impact on anxiety and depression. So by changing these active ingredients, you might potentially improve anxiety and depression. Or there's a number of things and a number of projects in the past that have identified different active ingredients. And the idea being that there's no one thing that impacts on this in a negative way, but there's a whole bunch of different things that can cause anxiety and depression for young people. And that if we tackle through a number of different approaches each of these active ingredients, that we can look at reducing this and preventing anxiety and depression in young people. So the data prize was just one of many projects that was trying to sort of continue this idea of how can we improve anxiety and depression. And the Mental Health Data Prize was specifically about encouraging or putting together teams in the UK and South Africa, some across the two countries, to explore existing data. So this is largely cohort data sets, to find new insights and build digital tools that mental health researchers can use. So the idea for this particular data prize is about, well, there's a couple of things in here. So it's about drawing on existing data rather than new data collection. It's about working towards building a digital tool, and about the target really being mental health researchers. So trying to make things easier for them in terms of the research they do. So the prize is structured in 3 phases, a discovery phase, then a prototyping phase, and then a sustainability phase. There are 6 months for each phase, so 18-month project in total, and then you apply for each phase one at a time and receive funding one at a time. So we're actually just at the end of the discovery phase and about to apply for the prototyping phase. As you can see, we were one of 10 teams in the discovery phase, and then they will be halved. So we may not be successful in the next phase, but part of what we're going to talk about is really our attempt to, obviously, you know, in competition with others, to try to actually get into that next phase and actually develop this prototype. So broadly, just to tell you what the different phases are about, in the discovery phase, the idea was that the 10 different teams took different approaches to drawing on exemplar longitudinal data sets, and then they drew on lived experience involvement and work towards taking all this information towards developing a digital tool for mental health researchers. So it was quite a broad remit, and I'll talk about our approach, but we all had to basically pitch different ideas. And then, like I said, I think there were 11 teams in the end they actually awarded it to. Yeah, so we were one of those teams, and we've really, as I'll explain, kind of been doing lots of different things that can work towards creating kind of information and getting guidance that we can then develop this prototype in the next phase if we get the funding for that. After that, you then again in competition with those 5 teams. For only 3 teams will go through to the sustainability phase, and then they get to turn their prototype into a sustainable digital tool that will continue to be used by mental health researchers. So as I say, you get extra funding in each round. So the starting point was then putting out a call for people to put in proposals, then pitch it. And then the way the big part of the project was about forming multidisciplinary teams. They didn't want it to be a project where you have one person who basically has expertise across using these cohort data sets and artificial intelligence. That was one of the things that we looked at, and lived experience. I mean, it's probably quite a tall order actually to get someone who has all those skills anyway, But the idea was that you'd be working together with people who you might not normally work with, and who might not have the same expertise as you. And a lot of it really is about developing those communication skills across those different groups, and actually coming up with, basically teaching each other new things as well. So the way we did this is Wellcome put together these sessions where they basically, it was a bit like speed dating. I think they might even call it like speedy networking. And the idea was that you would just go into breakout rooms, and they would kind of get you talking about your expertise, your backgrounds, and then we could reach out to people afterwards. And I think I'm trying to remember now, it wasn't even that long ago, but I haven't got a good memory for these things. But I think that one of the events I went to, I met Lisa. I think we were put in the same breakout room, and then Lisa reached out to me afterwards and said, oh, well, would I be interested in developing something with her? And Anissa I'd worked with on my last project, so I kind of pulled her into it. She was the one actually who mentioned the whole grant to me in the first place, but she hadn't met Lisa, I think, at this point. Lisa had contacts with Alex and Caitlin, who were part of a mental health charity. So basically we all met together, and just talked about a bunch of ideas that we could do. And it came together quite quickly, basically this project idea with this kind of broad remit of coming up with an idea for a digital tool. So we had to propose what we would do in the discovery phase and the prototyping phase at this point. We didn't have to outline the sustainability phase, because that would follow on from once you got a prototype, then you could say, well, how do you make this sustainable? So what we proposed was that we would use a longitudinal data set. That was part of the remit. It needs to use these longitudinal data sets. So luckily, Anissa and I had done this before. We'd used the longitudinal study of young people in England. In fact, I've actually presented on some of the research we've done some time ago now in this group. We had to select I think it was at least one active ingredient. So one of the active ingredients that had been researched before was physical activity. So there's evidence that shows that physical activity can positively impact mental health for young people. And Lisa has computer science background, which Lisa and I don't have at all. So her expertise was about developing this prototype. And then Alex, running this mental health charity, could bring the lived experience angle as well. So the idea is fully multidisciplinary. We could each do different things that other people in the team couldn't do, but we could come together to actually complement each other and come up with this fairly interesting sort of project idea. And that's what we pitched. And we, again, like I said, we had to kind of pitch what we would do in the prototype phase, even though we haven't got the money for that yet. But the idea would be that Anissa and I, with our experience of working with cohort data sets, we said it can be quite hard for researchers when they're getting started looking for variables. They might have limited quantitative experience. So we said, well, it'd be really useful to have a digital tool that helped kind of help them search for variables that were relevant, rather than having to manually scroll through lots and lots of things like catalogs and data dictionaries and all of those sorts of things, and it's sort of things that I'd kind of learned the hard way. How can we kind of somewhat make that process a bit more automated? And Lisa has expertise in artificial intelligence, machine learning. So we talked about, well, is there a way you could, in principle, develop a tool that does that? So that's what we pitched, and we were successful in getting money for the first phase, for the discovery phase. So we drew on the longitudinal study of young people in England, which at the moment there are 8 waves. They started it in 2004 when young people were aged 14. They actually have just done a recent wave, but the data is not available yet. So I think they're currently the individuals who are part of it would be early 30s now. But these are the age groups that are available in the data set. And as I said, Anissa and I were quite sort of experienced using this data set. So we already knew there were mental health measures within it, and we've done some mental health research using this data set. And this just gives you an example of some of the things where there are mental health measures, some of the age groups. So we set about designing a project. How can we all do different bits of the project and kind of bring this together to help input information to Lisa as the computer scientist and help her develop this prototype. Well, as I say, not just Lisa developing the prototype, but at least kind of give her the information she needs to be able to inform that. So we figured there were kind of 4 parts to this project. So the first part was data analysis. So obviously researchers, we want to have this tool that makes it easier for individuals to find variables. So we needed something that kind of modeled that process. And basically Anissa led effectively a sub-team with some research assistants looking at that. I then wanted to look at things more broadly. What sort of user might want to use this type of tool? So with my team, I work with Patrick, who's actually here today as well, and we have looked at kind of trying to get a sort of broad view of the type of user who might use this tool. One of the remits also for the project was about lived experience and involving young people with lived experience of mental health issues in the actual research. So Alex and Caitlin, working for charity Miracle, they were able to use their kind of networks to actually create a user group, a youth advisory group even, who could be part of the project. And in all of this, we hope to come together to create a requirements analysis that Lisa was doing in terms of taking all this information and understanding what the prototype needs to be. So I'm just going to explain about each of these stages, these parts of the discovery phase. So in Lisa's part of the team, so she, in order to kind of model the process of how you might look through a data set, we really needed people who weren't really experienced with the particular data set that we wanted to use, this LSYPE data set. And Anissa and I obviously have used it, well, not obviously, but I did mention that we'd used it quite a bit. So it's very hard to kind of understand, well, what are the challenges that we might face when we first started using it. So so Anissa hired a couple of research assistants who had experience with quantitative analyses and longitudinal analyses specifically, but no experience with that particular data set. So what they did is they went through the process of trying to seek variables that were related to physical activity and mental health, and just went through different processes of how they might go about that, how they might run analyses, answer research questions related to that, and they recorded the challenges, the issues that they kind of went through. So they actually created videos and basically put together information documents explaining the sort of challenges they had. So one of the things, there were a number of different challenges they identified, but one of the big ones was to do with understanding different search terms. So it's not just a matter of going, oh, I do control find, typing physical activity, and that will necessarily come up because there might not be anything labeled as physical activity in these data sets. So they had to basically look for different terms that might actually be relevant and search for those. And that was quite an exhaustive search, and that kind of modeled the process that Anissa and I would have gone through when we first started this process as well. So this kind of gave us information for the digital tool in terms of understanding that it would be useful for the tool to kind of automate some of this process to kind of understand how different terms might be related to each other. The part of the project that I led was that we wanted to build an idea of the type of researcher who might use this tool. So a mental health researcher, someone who maybe doesn't use cohort data sets, but does conduct research on anxiety and depression in young people. So in my team, Patrick and I, we used an approach called science mapping, and this was basically searching for key terms related to depression, anxiety, and physical activity and young people. And the idea was, it's basically you can visualize this using software to look for these keywords across published literature, and it looks for where there are kind of common links between these keywords. And the idea being that where there are common links, it shows that someone who might be doing research with particular concepts might also be doing, their research might also relate to associated concepts. So on the left, you've got kind of the big picture It's probably quite hard to see on the screen, but you get the bigger bubbles are kind of terms that come up more in the literature. So unsurprisingly, we were searching for things to do with anxiety, depression, physical activity. So it's not surprising they would come up a lot. But you can also see other things that we weren't searching for specifically, like COVID-19. Unsurprisingly, I suppose, is something that's come up a lot in the last few years. And on the right, it's just one I've sort of zoomed in on. It's just an example of one particular type of user profile. So this is just an example one. So you can't really see, it's probably a bit small, but in the little red one in the middle, it says medical students. So there's a number of terms that are linked to medical students here, including anxiety, depression, COVID-19, sleep quality, lifestyle, and also surveys, short questionnaires. So we can say, just from in a kind of big picture sense, from looking at these keywords, that researchers who are looking at medical students may also be looking at associated concepts like sleep quality and lifestyle, and they may also be using surveys for their methodology. So this kind of builds a picture of a particular type of user who might want to do research on this. So in terms of training the kind of digital tool that Lisa will talk about in a bit, it gives us a sense of, if these are the sorts of researchers, the type of research they may be doing, how do we make sure that the tool can accurately predict the sort of associated concepts they might also be looking for? So we need a tool that's not just a kind of a glorified kind of control find, as I said before, something that can anticipate the sort of terms that they might be looking for. There was a secondary purpose for this, which was it also gave us a sense of the different types of terms that researchers might use to mean the same thing. So COVID-19, you might remember right at the beginning, people were just referring to it as a coronavirus and things like that. So you could see a kind of a change in the kind of the terminology of different things that people use over time. And then we did two types of lived experience involvement. So the first was this youth advisory group. And as I said, that was largely arranged by Alex and Caitlin, who are part of the charity Miracle. And we did 4 lived experience sessions. These were little kind of focus group workshops with young people who had some lived experience of mental health issues. The idea wasn't that they were a data source. The idea was that they were experts in this. They had expertise, knowledge that they can advise us as young people that we maybe can't get from the literature or understand from our own experiences. So we broke up these sessions to have different aims. So the first one was about the type of variables that might be used in data analysis, then different phrases, terms that might be used to talk about mental health, and then a bit more about, we looked at the actual questions asked in the data set. And in the final one, we talked a bit about artificial intelligence, because that's what the digital tool draws on. So just to kind of think about their kind of trust in that, ethics related to it. And that just kind of gave us a bit of a sense of maybe just a bit more nuance to kind of what we were thinking about with how the digital tool might be used. So although it isn't young people with this experience who are using the digital tool or will use it, it's mental health researchers, it's useful obviously to ultimately speak to the people who will be the real beneficiaries of that kind of research. A second part of the lived experience involvement was actually directly speaking to mental health researchers who might use the digital tool. So we reached out to some researchers who do mental health research, and this is just a few quotes here. So the first 2 are quotes from, so we asked if they could basically write a testimonial. We told them a bit about the project and said, well, what's your experience or expertise with longitudinal data analyses, and kind of what do you think are the facilitators or barriers to that? So the first 2 researchers didn't have any experience with using cohort data sets, so they talked a bit about some of the barriers that might get in the way. So the first one there about the variable selection and prioritization, the second one about kind of confidence and training guidance, and then the third one was actually an experienced user of the LSYP dataset, and they talked a little bit about how, you know, the variable database, different names used for the variables might differ from dataset to dataset, and how that could be a challenge. So all of this kind of informed our understanding of again, that the user and the information they might need. So all of this was basically taken together, the approaches I've talked about so far, and the idea was that if we take all this information, we can feed this into the prototype that we're developing. So Lisa, I'm just going to hand over to you and you can talk a bit about the prototype.
Yeah, so the idea is to get an intelligent interface. Yeah, it's here. So just to get an intelligent interface, which can be used by mental health researchers. So we come up with something very, very basic interface, probably having a search variable they're looking for, or it could be a research question. So if someone is asking a research question, is there an impact of physical activity on mental health? So it will get this information from the user, kind of find out what are the main concept that researchers is looking for, and then find kind of rank those variables that we have in the next step dataset according to the relevance to that research question or search variable. So that's the basic idea. But obviously, we need to understand a little bit more how this dataset was created, because it took a couple of years when data was collecting since 2004. Language changes over different waves. The question has been asked in a little bit different way, although the question was quite same. This kind of evolution or like variance in language has to be captured when we are searching for a variable. And it also has to be the lived experience. When we had this young advisory group and we had some discussion with them, we found sometimes data is not really complete. So just to give you an example, data doesn't have a good representation of LGBTQ community. So if there is a research question we are asking, is there any impact of physical activity on mental health? And if you see, yeah, there is a very good correlation between these two. Physical activity, it does improve mental health. But we don't know how does that, what is the effect if someone is coming from LGBTQ community. So we want to know more about, want to augment this, our analysis with this new lived experience commentary. And then we also have to include science mapping that SMaRteN is doing, because we want to know broader aspects of how it's actually been used, how terms has been used in different contexts and different research community. And we want to incorporate all those things into the search algorithm. Once we have this, we'll get a ranking of the variable based on kind of our understanding of the research questions or the variable that researchers is looking for. And then there will be an option for the researchers to kind of give a feedback to the algorithm. So they could say, okay, variable 1 in this diagram is showing this is the most important or most relevant to this research question. But the researcher might see, no, actually variable 2 is more relevant than variable 1. And their corresponding labels, because they can also see what is the label actually explaining what is the variable is. And then it will also give some contextualization, why it thinks that this is the highest ranked variable with this search term. Once they give this feedback, the algorithm will kind of change its behavior or adapt this information based on this feedback. And that will re-rank this variable based on the researcher's needs. So this also gives us this interpretability and explainability, and there is a human in the loop when this AI system is actually giving some decision. So this is kind of our at this moment idea, but obviously this will be an agile project management. So we'll take more interviews, we'll take more kind of feedback from young advisory group, and we'll adapt our design. This intelligent interface would be different probably. Would probably add more thing based on the feedback we get from the people who will be using this. So I'm actually looking forward to this forum today. If we get some feedback, what do you think about this interface? What we could change, or how we can make it better? And obviously, we can use this feedback even for our proposal and for our next phase. So that's all for me.
Thanks, Lisa. So essentially, I'll just say thanks to our funder, Wellcome Trust and Social Finance, who have administered the project and worked with us really closely. Basically, next steps are hopefully prototyping. I'm saying hopefully because we now need to do a pitch, basically. So really everything I just talked about, we now need to feed back to the funder, and we're putting it together into basically our deliverables, which are function as a proposal for the next stage, and then we have to be interviewed and pitch it. So with that in mind, I talked for a little bit longer than I wanted to, but we've got what, half an hour left, I think. So really, I mean, hopefully there's questions. Like I say, it's beneficial for us as well, but obviously we want to answer people's questions if you're kind of interested in anything. But yeah, thanks for listening.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Kieran and Lisa. I mean, just from my perspective, it seems like such a fantastic idea, and it's really great to see lived experience incorporated in such a way. So I'll hand it over to you guys on the call. If anyone's got a question, feel free to type it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. If anyone, I'm just having a look if anyone has at the moment. No one has. So I'm going to jump in with a question then, if that's okay. So I know you briefly touched on sort of the idea that sometimes the data sets aren't always going to be, I don't know what the right word is, necessarily complete. So you mentioned the idea of sort of LGBTQ plus populations not being represented. And obviously the search results are only going to be as good as the data that the data set you've got in front of you. So I just wondered, how would it work in terms of sort of flagging sort of underrepresented groups in that, and any conclusions you can draw might not necessarily, you know, if it's only drawing on the data you've got, it's not necessarily going to be that per se accurate, or I don't know, how was that going to be incorporated into it?
That's a really good question, isn't it? Because I think that it's something we hadn't really thought about, I suppose, is whether we would record the searches, whether we would, you know, if we did that, there's probably ethical dilemmas about whether we retain that data. Because in a way, what you would want is some kind of either a feedback mechanism where individuals could go, well, I've been searching for things like LGBTQ and there aren't any terms that are relevant. Actually, incidentally, in the data set, there are measures related to that, to that particular variable, but it is slightly limited. I think largely also because of when they started recording those particular variables, I think we've probably since 2004 kind of changed how we conceptualized a lot of these things. So I don't think that I think if they probably recorded that kind of data now, it probably would be better. But yeah, I don't know, Lisa, what your thoughts are on that, whether there's ways that we could potentially in the prototype maybe record those things and then, or get some kind of feedback where it could be pointed out, you know, I'm looking for these things and they're just not in the data set, and we could, I guess, feed that back to the data owners.
Yeah, so that's where it comes to this contextualization. So when some of our variables says that this is relevant, it also tells you how it is contextually relevant. So when what we are planning, it's still in the planning mode, and it's also still we are kind of designing how we can actually keep records of the lived experience commentary or their thoughts in a very ethical and without kind of revealing any kind of personal information or anything. So we're thinking about something like Reddit-like interface where people would add their comments willingly and as much they want. Obviously, they won't want to reveal their identity if they don't want to. And then we can kind of connect our tool with that interface and get, if we see that when we do contextualization, when we see that this data is actually not significant enough for any reason, because we have statistics on the existing data, and we can see how significant actually this relation or this correlation is, and how many people responded, and what community has been represented in what percentage. So based on that, we can kind of connect this existing data with the data we are getting from current, like from present day. Because as you can see, 2004 and now it's a quite a long time, and society, although it doesn't change that fast, but it is changing. And then our understanding, our thought, and people are getting the LGBTQ community, for example, we have their voice recently than before. So we also want to incorporate or at least augment our analysis, how things has changed over this time and how that has an impact on our research question.
And I think in terms of that change in times, like you say, Lisa, the because the terminology has changed, something like that particular example, actually, I think the way that variable might be labeled is, I think it sort of said sexual stroke gender orientation, which obviously we know are different things, but they kind of lump them together as if that's one category. So you kind of, arguably, someone who's got expertise in this and knowledge, they might be searching for terms that aren't there because they're almost having to search for terms that maybe we don't use anymore. Potentially, I'm probably being slightly unfair on the data set. It's not completely out of date, but you know, it's just slightly different.
Yeah.
Super. Ooh, Anna, I can see you've got your hand up.
Hi, I just wanted to ask a question more related sort of the lived experience part of the project. I was just wondering, because I'm part of a youth advisory group and we're working on sort of developing a framework for youth participation. So I just wondered, like, did you have a framework for the youth participation, or what did those focus groups look like? Did you do any activities, or how did those sort of conversations go to get that data?
They were quite general, I'll be honest, and kind of responsive in the sense of after the first one, we didn't have them all planned out before we started, for example. We knew we would run 4 because it was a 6-month project and we just knew timing wise, and it was the same group of individuals in that group because they came through Alex's charity. And we kind of set out that this will be our first one, and then based on what we got from that, we kind of then shaped, we didn't want to do the same kind of thing. And in terms of activities, we did occasionally do things like we played them some little videos that we'd made for a previous project about kind of scenarios, and just said, oh, you know, talking about that scenario, what do you think of that character in that? And it wasn't about them necessarily sharing their own experiences, because as I said, we were treating them as experts. So we would say things like, you know, you could talk about a friend, you know, or they could even if you want to talk about yourself, you could anonymize that by saying it's to do with a friend, or it's just a hypothetical, so you don't have to identify yourself in that. So they weren't activities per se, which I think maybe if it was face to face, we probably would have maybe had more. I know you can do these things online, but it's just slight limitation, slight barrier. Coming back to your question about you were asking about the sort of sorry, can you remind me how you asked about the youth advisory group in terms of?
Yeah, so I just said, like, do you have a framework for youth participation?
That's what it was, yeah, sorry, I couldn't quite remember how you framed it. Yeah, so we didn't really have a particular framework, but one of the things that we're aiming to do with the next round, if we get there, because lived experience involvement needs to be all the way through. It's not just, okay, you've got the information you need to do the prototype, now you stop with that. The whole point is we need to have a plan for what we do next with them. And I think that the next stage will be a bit more kind of a bit less general, kind of asking them questions about what do you think of this, what do you think of that, and more probably working towards, okay, so this is the type of research that someone might be doing, kind of how can you kind of help shape that, and maybe trying to get them to help design the sessions as well, some more kind of actual active involvement in what they're running. But no, I think we probably don't have a framework per se. And actually, I don't know, Alex, whether you want to jump in and add to any of this.
Yeah, so I've seen a couple of frameworks, if I remember rightly, over the last year or two. So McPin, I'm pretty sure, have created like a framework. And then there's the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto, CAMH. And like, if you can't find them, then I've got them somewhere, but I'd have to have a look. So the CAMH one, I think, is quite long. If I, it's long. So those would be 2 sources of information for kind of, because McPin. Have you heard of McPin?
How do you spell that? Or I haven't heard of them, no.
So MCPIN. So they like have a regular newsletter. It's a mental health foundation, and they're engaged in research, and they do a lot of what's it called, PPI, or patient participant in research. That's kind of one of their things, and they've got a monthly newsletter, and it lists all the opportunities that they've heard of across the UK of projects. So if a project wants young people, they go and say to them at PIN, can we be on your newsletter? That's kind of how it works. And yeah, I'm pretty sure they got a framework. Usually, I can introduce you to someone there as well if you want to just email me. And we're just like, as a charity, kind of having done this, and over a couple of projects over the last 3 years, we go, all right, we need young people or whatever. So I then go out and find young people for the group for whatever the project is, and we run it. And we're just trying to create I think a consistent group is probably a bit hopeful in mental health. But like a long list of people, and then we can invite people to specific projects. So are you just doing a framework from like an academic perspective because you want to write about it, or running a young people's group?
So I'm actually working with the World Health Organization. So we're trying to develop a framework for the European region. So it's obviously going to be quite broad. So it was just sort of working to see like if there was examples that we could use, or I could like bring it to the table.
All right. Yeah. Well, if you email, do you want me to put my email in the chat? If you email me, I'll have a look for the if I can find them easily. But yeah, there's certainly PIN and this other one have done pretty substantial. This is what should happen.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So Anna, I have a question. So if you are interested, would you mind if we contact you, if we get our next phase, for your advice and also kind of help us developing a framework, or letting us know, Young Advisory, what kind of framework actually work best for Young Advisory Group, and this kind of, because you have just listened to our presentation and you kind of know what kind of thing we want to do. Your help will be great. If you have time and like you want to be involved, basically.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, I'm happy to help where I can. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, let us know your email address, so I'll get in touch.
Okay, I think I'm as a guest, so I can't access the chat. But
right. I was just going to say, because Joe's put some links in there, but I can see Joe's put a hand up now anyway. So she might 2 seconds. If Joe wanted to jump in.
Hi, sorry, just to pop in and say, it sounds like there's so much interest in this area. So I just wanted to kind of put out an open call that anyone can email me any resources they think of that would be good for me to share within the group space. I can email it around to everyone. But also, if you're sat there thinking, I'm interested in this, literally just ping me an email saying, I'm very interested in youth involvement. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. And what I'll do is I'll kind of compile the list of everyone's emails, and then I can even create like a little subgroup in here, or I can just kind of, if everyone's happy to have their email address shared, I can just kind of share the email addresses around and say, here are some people who are all interested in this area of work. Feel free to kind of pick up with each other. So basically, give me as much or as little context as you would like. I realize you're very, very busy. But essentially, if you're sat here thinking, I want to get engaged with all of this, just email me and I'll try and link everyone up.
It's worth pointing out that if we get the next round of funding, there will be funding for this part of it as well. So this isn't a free labour we're expecting. Yeah. If you have involvement, we did pay our advisors to be involved in it. So this is obviously something we'd have to talk about and look with our funder and make sure that how we use the money. But it isn't just something where we're saying that reach out to us and share a bunch of information with us. This is we're drawing on your expertise, and you'll be paid for compensated for your expertise.
Okay, super. Oh, I can see Rebecca's put something in the chat. Okay, this is quite broad. What's the dream with using AI research?
Lisa, I think you're probably best to answer that one.
What is the question again? Sorry.
What is the dream with AI research?
I don't understand the question. What is the dream?
What's the dream? What's the dream? So like, what would you love to be able to ultimately do with using AI in research?
Okay.
Quite broad.
Yes. So
okay. Good question.
Okay. Yeah. Good question. Yeah, I like this question. So AI, I think for me, the first dream is to remove this fear from people's mind that AI will take over human, because the way the current state of AI is nowhere near to take over human, and I don't think it will ever be possible. So my dream is to have AI as a good friend who helps you to do things where you would spend 6 months or a year for our data set, for example, to understand what kind of information you have. We have more than 8,000 variables and 8,000 questions in the data set. So to be able to do any kind of analysis, you have to spend 6 months a year just to go through this data set, just to understand this data set. We want to make this efficient. So what we want to do is we want to re-rank this based on the researcher's needs. So the researcher doesn't need to go through this 8,000 variables or memorize them or try to make sense of them. They would be re-ranked for them instead of 6 months and a year, probably within a couple of days. So the dream is to accept AI. AI has some issues we need to deal with, like we need to understand its explainability, its contextualization, the ethics, what kind of data is being used to train the model, and all sort of things. But I think once we have a good framework, because European Union is doing Artificial Intelligence Act, also in UK we have national strategies for AI. So there are different kind of rules and regulations are going to be imposed before any AI system can be used. So as soon as we have a framework, or still whenever we do something, we try to follow all those kind of known rules and regulations so far. We need like more acceptance. That's why one of the lived experience, our focus group was based on how we can build trust when we use AI, because sometimes people think, oh, AI is going to be like take over human and it's gonna destroy us. I think it is actually coming from those movies where AI robots is like killing human and those kind of things. So that's an imaginary and very fictional kind of concept, but that's people, when it gets in people's mind, it's very difficult to remove that. So I think dream is to kind of make it more acceptable, make it more trustworthy. So that's why my research is on trustworthy AI, as much as we can do it to make it more kind of accepted, so that it can help us basically become a good friend.
Brilliant. Tom, you've got your hand up, and then Alex, you can go.
Yeah,
so Tom,
thank you
Alex.
very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. I must admit, AI and quantitative stuff is a completely different world to where I'm from. So I'm more qualitative and PPIE involvement. So it's great to see that you have got lived experience within that process. So, I mean, I think it links to the dream question that we've just gone through. But in terms of from a researcher's point of view and being able to do research or review literature, where would that AI process sit, and how might that look from my point of view?
Is it for this project or in general?
Just in general. So if this AI becomes, AI and research becomes a useful tool, how does that look? What does that interface look like for a researcher like me or you, in terms of being able to access it and being able to conduct research more efficiently, I suppose?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So let's think about our Google search, right? So we have a Google search, and that helps us to find things. So the way I'm developing this kind of envisioning this tool is to come up with a search tool, search kind of mechanism, where it would give you information which is relevant to you. So there are two things kind of underpinning theory, if you want to put it in that way. One is how we can develop intelligent interface in terms of how that tool can help diverse kind of researchers doing mental health research. And second is this knowledge extraction, because we have this 8,000 different questions, for example, for this project. But there are many other projects we have. We have data set, we have PubMed, for example, huge data available there, but we need to find out what is relevant for us. We have PubChem, where we have all kind of databases of chemical information, how we can get actually relevant chemical for a project, for a researcher. So in previous work, I have also worked on knowledge extraction for chemical compounds, where we used PubMed and PubChem and incorporating them so that it can be help researchers to find what they're looking for. So just to give an example, in that project, where a research assistant would spend a 3-year project to find out relevant compound, where they would go through each and every literature to find out if there is a chemical compound which has an impact on health span. Now the tool can actually do it in a couple of months' time, as long as you have inputted all the relevant things you need, your requirements, what you want from this tool. And then it's a couple of months, it can generate the same thing. So it's just make it efficient. So this AI, it helps you know what features, what variables are relevant for your research, that research you're conducting. And it also gives you some contextualization, gives you some interpretability, why this AI system is saying that this variable is important. That just to make sense to you, is just not just randomly picking up something for you. And it's, instead of spending 6 or 1 year time for you to understand the relevant variable, it just give you less time. It just accelerate the whole process. So that's how AI helps you in your research.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, can I ask a follow-up question to you, Tom? As a qualitative researcher, what do you think it would take in terms of artificial intelligence to kind of encourage you to maybe use something like this for like, do you see quantitative research as completely out of the equation for you?
Not necessarily. Yeah, not necessarily. I think it's just, I mean, when I first started as a student, I was predominantly quantitative. So, and then coming into the research world that I'm in, I've been doing it 8 years now as a quali. So I've sort of seen both sides of it. And obviously I appreciate the importance of both aspects. But I think if I was shown it and I had a bit of confidence in myself to do it, I think I'd be very much using it. Yeah. I think it's just because, like you say, AI, I've probably got the wrong idea of what that looks like, and maybe it's a bit more simple than it actually is. But I think, yeah, if there was something in front of me and this is how we could use it, and if it was to make my job easier and your job easier, then yeah, I'd give it a go. I'd be very keen to have a go at that. So.
Yeah, I think we have plans for training. Once, if we develop our tool, I can tell about our tools or our plan. We have plans to do kind of delivering some training, how to use it, and also taking feedback from researchers like you who are doing qualitative research, how your research can be useful by this tool, because obviously quantitative researchers and qualitative research sometimes have kind of different kind of research, the requirement from the tool. Yeah. And while we give you training, probably we can also get feedback and improve the tool as we go.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds great. Thank you.
I'm super mindful of time, but Alex, you've got your hand up. So if unless anyone wants to put anything in the chat, we can make Alex the last question.
Oh, I was just going to say, so I found the 2 bits of things on the focus groups. Do you want me to send that to Joe? Would that get
that'd be brilliant if you could share it. Yes, please.
Please. I've also just popped into the chat a link, and there's something about an award that some of you might be interested in. Come up with weird formatting, which is the Martin Lawler Research Award, which is basically a £2,000 bursary for early career researchers into working in self-harm and suicide prevention. So you can kind of have a look there about how to apply.
Just
can I just finish? Like, I would imagine if you went into ChatGPT, which is like a natural language model, and you said, I've got a focus group with under 18s affected by anxiety and depression, please give me 10 qualitative questions that I should be asking them. Like 3 seconds later, I would imagine you'd get 10 questions, and then you obviously know your job, yeah, and you can go, well, in fact, you could go like ChatGPT, I don't like questions 7 and 5, can you change them? And I'm a bit more interested in this, and you've forgotten LGBT community, go. 3 seconds later, you just got all the questions. I would think that's what would happen. I mean, I did it with like I forget. You know, I said give me three tweets on anxiety, and I want you to give me the symptoms, treatments, and signs. Like 3 seconds later or less, I said, can you make that into a poem in 3 tweets? Bang. You know, I mean, so just it's like Lisa said, you know, she's gone from 3 years to 2 months. So if you had a new qualitative focus group you're not really sure about, not feeling a bit tired, don't want to write down the questions.
I swear that everyone just uses ChatGPT to turn things into poems.
Yes.
So I don't have access to the chat. So if anyone can send us like what has been shared in the chat so that we can also have access to that.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem at all. I'm just seeing here Rebecca's put AI could be used for a qualitative synthesis to an extent or systematic reviews.
I mean, one thing is about our particular digital tool, if we get to develop it, is that the whole scope really is about increasing this type of research to people who wouldn't normally go anywhere near these sorts of data sets. So that's why I asked the question, kind of pose it to Tom. It's like, what sort of thing would put you off or kind of encourage it? So it's helpful to know things like training and kind of building that confidence. It's really important for us to understand that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the whole thing around sort of trust and yeah, it's fascinating. Okay, yeah, so we're nearing 12 o'clock. So unless anyone wants to put any more questions in the chat, and then would it be all right if anyone did, we could forward you the questions and then you get to...
I should have put my email on the slide, but it's Kieran, I don't know if my name shows up on here, kieran.ballou@usq.edu.au. Or you can just Google any of our names, probably Alex, Lisa, myself, and you can just find us. If you have anything you want to talk to us about, any interest in being involved in these discussions, advisory, you have expertise you want to share, any of that kind of thing, please do reach out to us. Yeah, be really, really helpful.
Okay, super. So best of luck, everyone, with getting the next round. Sounds absolutely fascinating, and I do hope you get it. Yeah, I think we're back on the 15th of March. Remember, we're going to a monthly schedule now. And Joe, I'm sure, will email out the details of the speaker close to the date. But yeah, I hope everyone has a good rest of their day. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.